The great hall of the Galaxy Council floated in the endless black of space. It was a massive station, bigger than most cities, built from metals that shone like silver under the light of distant stars. Inside, thousands of aliens from hundreds of worlds gathered in a circular chamber. Their bodies were strange and different. Some had scales, some had feathers, some had no solid form at all. But today they all shared one feeling. Feared Ambassador Turan of the Helix Collective stood at the center of the chamber. He was tall and thin, with gray skin and 4 eyes that never blinked. His voice echoed through the hall as he spoke. The Drax swarm has entered our galaxy. They were spotted in the Outer Rim 3 days ago. Based on their speed and direction, they will reach the Sol system in 90 solar cycles. A wave of whispers moved through the crowd. The Sol system. Earth. The home of humans. Turan raised his hand for silence. I know many of you do not care about the humans. They are young. They joined our union only 500 years ago. They have no great fleets. They have no powerful weapons. They are, by our standards, primitive. He paused and looked toward a small group sitting in the corner of the chamber. The human delegation. There were only 4 of them. They looked so small compared to the massive aliens around them. Drac do not care if a species is primitive or advanced, Turan continued. They consume everything. They have destroyed civilizations that were old when my species was still crawling in the mud. They are heading straight for Earth. Admiral Yuna listened to every word. She was a woman of 50 years, with short gray hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. She wore a simple blue uniform with no medals, no decorations. She did not need them. Everyone who knew her understood what she was. Beside her sat General Tay, a man built like a mountain. His face was covered with old scars, and his hands were rough from years of work. He had fought in 3 wars before joining the diplomatic corps. He did not speak much. He did not need to. Behind them sat Dr. Hannah, the chief scientist of Earth's defense program. She was young, barely 35, but her mind was sharper than anyone in the room. And next to her was Captain Mina, an engineer who had built her first spacecraft engine at the age of 19. Turan turned to face them directly. Admiral Yuna, I am sorry. We cannot send fleets to protect your world. The Drac are too many, and our own systems are at risk. We can offer you transport ships. We can help you evacuate your people to safer worlds. But you must leave Earth. There is no other way. Yuna did not move. She did not blink. She simply looked at Turan with calm, steady eyes. How many Drac ships are coming? She asked. Turan hesitated. Our scouts counted approximately 12,000 vessels, perhaps more. And how many people live on Earth? According to your records, approximately 11 billion. Yuna nodded slowly. So you are asking us to move 11 billion people across the galaxy in 90 days? Where would we go? How would we live? What would happen to our culture, our history, our identity? Delegate Mora of the Silken Court laughed. She was a beautiful creature, with skin like polished wood and eyes like gemstones. Her people were known for their art and their cruelty in equal measure. Your culture, she said. Your history. Admiral, your species has existed for less than a heartbeat in cosmic time. You have no great works, you have no ancient wisdom, you have nothing worth saving except your lives. And even those are worth very little in the grand scheme of things. The chamber fell silent. Everyone waited for Yuna to respond. She stood up slowly. Her movements were calm and controlled. She looked at Mora without anger, without hatred. It's just a quiet, cold certainty. We have survived ice ages, Yuna said. We have survived plagues that killed half our population. We have survived wars that burned entire continents. We've survived meteor impacts, supervolcano eruptions, and countless other disasters that should have wiped us out. And we did all of this before we ever reached the stars. She paused and let her words sink in. You say we have nothing, but we have something none of you understand. We have 10,000 years of learning how to survive when survival should be impossible. We have ancestors who killed mammoths with wooden spears. We have ancestors who crossed oceans on boats made from animal skins. We have ancestors who built civilizations in deserts, in frozen wastelands, in places where no life should exist. General Tay stood up beside her. His voice was deep and rough, like stones grinding together. The Drac are coming. We understand, but we will not run. We will not hide. We will fight. Observer Kell, a young official from the Helix Collective, could not contain himself. Fight with what? You have no plasma weapons. You have no shield generators. Your fleet consists of mining ships and cargo haulers. You cannot fight the Drac with trading vessels. Tay looked at him with something that might have been pity. We have rocks, he said. We have sticks. We have time. The chamber erupted in confusion. Aliens shouted questions and accusations. Some laughed. Some shook their heads in disbelief. But the humans did not react. They simply stood there, calm and patient, like they knew something the others did not. Ambassador Turan raised his hand for silence. When the noise died down, he looked at Yuna with genuine curiosity. Admiral, please explain. What do you mean by rocks and sticks? Are you speaking in metaphor? Yuna smiled. It was a small smile, but there was something dangerous in it. No metaphor, she said. When our ancestors faced enemies they could not defeat with strength, they used cleverness. When they had no weapons, they made weapons from whatever they could find. Rocks, sticks, bones, fire. They turned the world itself into a weapon. She gathered her delegation with a glance. We will do the same. We will use what we have. When the Drac arrive, they will learn the same lesson that every enemy of humanity has learned throughout our history. What lesson is that? Torin asked. Yuna walked toward the exit. She stopped at the door and looked back over her shoulder. Never underestimate a species that learned to kill gods with sharpened stones. Lo. And with that, the human delegation left the chamber. The Galaxy Council sat in stunned silence. Some thought the humans had gone mad with fear. Some thought they were simply too proud to accept help. But Ambassador Turan sat very still, his 4 eyes fixed on the door where the humans had disappeared. He had lived for over 800 years. He had seen empires rise and fall, had watched countless species face extinction. In all that time, he had learned to recognize one thing above all else. The look in Admiral Yuna's eyes was not fear. It was not desperation. It was not madness. It was the look of a predator that had just been given permission to hunt, and for the first time in centuries, Ambassador Turan felt something he had almost forgotten. He felt afraid. The news reached Earth before Admiral Yuna's ship did. Within hours, every screen on the planet showed the same message. The Drac were coming. 90 days until arrival. Galaxy Council had offered evacuation. Humanity had refused. At first, there was panic. People ran through the streets. Markets emptied. Communication networks crashed under the weight of billions of calls. Parents held their children close and wondered if they had made a terrible mistake by staying. But then something changed. It started in a small village in the mountains of Korea. An old man named Grandfather Park sat outside his house, carving a piece of wood with a simple knife. His grandson ran up to him, tears in his eyes. "Grandfather, the aliens are coming. We're all going to die." The old man did not look up from his carving. "Are we? The news says they have 12,000 ships. We have nothing." Grandfather Park finally set down his knife. He looked at his grandson with calm, wise eyes. "When I was young," he said, "my grandfather told me a story. He said that long ago, our ancestors lived in caves. They had no fire. They had no metal. They had nothing but their hands and their minds. And yet they survived. Do you know how?" The boy shook his head. "They learned to think. They learned to plan. They learned to work together. And they learned that anything can be a weapon if you use it the right way." He held up the piece of wood he had been carving. It was a simple arrow. "This is how our ancestors killed their enemies. Not with lasers or plasma. With wood and stone and patience." The boy stared at the arrow. Something shifted in his eyes. Fear became curiosity. Curiosity became understanding. "Can you teach me?" he asked. Grandfather Park smiled. "I can teach everyone." Stories like this happened all over the world. Old knowledge that had been forgotten for centuries suddenly became valuable again. People who had spent their lives studying ancient warfare found themselves in high demand. Blacksmiths who made decorative swords for tourists started forging real weapons. Hunters who used bows for sport began teaching soldiers how to shoot. But the real work happened in the cities. Dr. Hannah stood before the Global Defense Assembly in Seoul. The room was filled with the most powerful people on Earth. Presidents, generals, scientists, engineers. They all looked at her with desperate hope. The Drax ships are made from organic and metallic compounds, she explained. Our intelligence shows that they are designed to absorb energy weapons. Plasma spreads across their hulls. Lasers barely scratch but they have one weakness. She pressed a button, and the screen behind her showed a simulation. Kinetic impact. Mass times velocity. The faster something hits them, the more damage it does. A small rock traveling at 1/10 of light speed carries more energy than a nuclear bomb. And we have millions of rocks. Defense Minister SEO leaned forward. He was a large man with a serious face and a reputation for asking hard questions. You want to throw asteroids at them? Yes. The asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter contains more rocks than we can count. Most are small, but many are the size of buildings. Some are the size of mountains. We attach engines to them, accelerate them over weeks, and release them in the Drax path. No explosives needed. Pure physics. General Tay stood up from his seat. And what about ground defense? If even one Drax ship reaches Earth, we need to be ready. Colonel Day, head of ground operations, took the floor. He was a lean man with quick eyes and a mind that never stopped working. The Drax use electromagnetic sensors to detect threats, he said. They can see power signatures from miles away. Every gun, every vehicle, every piece of electronic equipment shows up on their screens like a beacon. He pressed his own button, and the screen changed to show various weapons. But they cannot see unpowered objects. Wood does not emit signals. Stone does not show up on sensors. If we fight with primitive weapons, we become invisible. A general from Europe raised his hand. You want us to fight an alien invasion with bows and arrows? Not just bows and arrows. Pit traps. Wooden spikes? Ceramic blades that can cut through armor at the joints. Nets made from carbon fiber that are stronger than steel. We use old tactics with new materials. We make the Drac fight a war they have never seen before. Captain Mina stood up next. She was the youngest person in the room, but her voice carried authority. My engineering teams can build mass drivers from mining equipment. We use electromagnets to launch rocks at incredible speeds. We turn every mountain into a weapon, every canyon into a trap, every forest into an ambush site. The room fell silent as everyone processed what they were hearing. It was insane. It was primitive. It went against everything modern warfare had taught them. And yet, somehow it made sense. Defense Minister Esiok finally spoke. How long do we need? 60 days for the asteroid defenses, Dr. Hannah answered. 40 days for ground preparations. We have 90. It will be close, but we can do it. Esiok looked around the room. Every face showed the same expression. Fear mixed with determination. Doubt mixed with hope. Then we start now, he said. Today, this moment. Every factory, every workshop, every school and farm. Everyone works. Everyone fights. Everyone contributes. The vote was unanimous. Within hours, the world transformed. Factories that had made cars and computers began producing engines for asteroids. Miners who had dug for gold and iron now dug for the densest rocks they could find. Scientists calculated trajectories with desperate precision, figuring out exactly where to place each asteroid for maximum impact. On the ground, the changes were even more dramatic. Schools closed and became training centers. Children learned to carve arrowheads from obsidian, a volcanic glass sharper than any steel blade. Teenagers practiced moving silently through forests, hiding from sensors that could detect the smallest electronic signal. Old soldiers taught young recruits the ancient art of warfare. Ambush, patience, surprise. Grandmothers wove nets from spider silk polymers. Materials invented in laboratories but used in ways that were thousands of years old. Grandfathers taught their families how to dig pit traps, how to set snares, how to turn the land itself into a weapon in the asteroid belt. Thousands of ships swarmed like insects around massive rocks. They were not warships. They were mining vessels, cargo haulers, even passenger transports that had been hastily converted. They attached engines to asteroids with welding torches and prayer. They programmed trajectories with computers that were barely powerful enough for the job. It was messy. It was desperate. It was the most ambitious engineering project in human history, and somehow, day by day, it came together. Admiral Yuna watched the progress from her command center on the moon. Reports flooded in from every corner of Earth and every sector of the solar system. Production numbers, training statistics, asteroid positions. General Tay stood beside her, his scarred face unreadable. "Do you think we can win?" he asked. Yuna was silent for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but steady. "I think we can survive. And for humans, that has always been enough. Survival means another chance. Another day? Another opportunity to adapt and overcome." She looked up at the stars. "The Drak have never faced a species like us. They conquer through superior technology. But technology is just a tool. And we have been using tools since before we could speak." She turned back to her screens. "Let them come. We will show them what 10,000 years of survival looks like." Somewhere in the asteroid belt, the first rock began its long, slow journey toward the edge of the solar system. The countdown had begun. Observer Kel had been sent to watch the humans die. That was not the official reason, of course. The Galaxy Council had told him he was there to document humanity's final days, to record their evacuation efforts, and to provide assistance if requested. But Kel knew the truth. Everyone expected Earth to fall. His job was to witness the end of a species and report back so that other young civilizations could learn from the humans. Mistakes. He arrived in the Sol system 40 days after the council meeting, his small diplomatic vessel sliding through the void with quiet efficiency. What he saw made him stop breathing. The asteroid belt was alive. Thousands of rocks, ranging from the size of houses to the size of mountains, moved in careful formation. Each one had engines attached to its surface. Each one was surrounded by swarms of tiny human ships, adjusting trajectories, adding fuel, checking systems. The rocks were not just floating anymore. They were traveling. Slowly, patiently. They were building speed toward the edge of the solar system. Kel opened a communication channel to the nearest human vessel. "This is Observer Kel of the Helix Collective. What is happening here?" A tired voice answered, "We're making bullets I do not understand. These asteroids, we're turning them into weapons. When the Drak arrive, they'll fly straight into a wall of rocks moving at relativistic speeds. No shields can stop that. No armor can survive it." Kel stared at his sensors in disbelief. The numbers did not make sense. The energy required to move these asteroids should have been far beyond human capability. Yet there they were, thousands of them, already building momentum. "How are you powering this?" he asked. "We stripped our orbital stations, cannibalized our moon bases, shut down half our power grid on Earth. Everything that isn't essential to survival is being used here." The voice paused. "We don't need luxuries anymore. We need weapons." Kel ended the communication and sat in silence for a long time. Then he turned his ship toward Earth. What he saw on the planet was even more disturbing. His drones flew over continents that had been transformed. Cities were dark, their power diverted to the war effort. But the countryside was full of activity. Humans moved through forests like ghosts, practicing silent movement. Fields had been converted into training grounds where soldiers learned to throw spears and shoot arrows. Mountains had been hollowed out, their stone walls lined with metal rails that Kel's sensors identified as electromagnetic launchers in one valley. He watched as a group of children practiced setting traps. They dug pits and filled them with wooden spikes. They wove nets from thin, impossibly strong fiber. They carved arrowheads from black volcanic glass that glinted in the sunlight. In another region, old men and women sat in circles, teaching younger generations skills that had been forgotten for centuries. How to track prey through forests. How to move without making sound. How to survive in the wilderness with nothing but a knife and determination. Kel recorded everything and sent his first report to the Galaxy Council. Humans have not evacuated. They are preparing to fight. They are building kinetic weapons from asteroids and training their population in primitive warfare. I believe they have lost their minds. The response came quickly. Delegate Marat's voice dripped with amusement. Primitive warfare? Against the Drac? How delightful. At least they will provide entertainment before they are consumed. Continue observing, Kel. This should be fascinating. But Ambassador Tehran's response was different. His message was private, sent only to Kel. Tell me everything. Leave nothing out. Kel spent the next 30 days doing exactly that. He watched humans transform their world into a fortress. He saw engineers build catapults that could launch boulders into orbit. He saw scientists calculate asteroid trajectories with such precision that they could predict impact points within meters. He saw soldiers train for combat that no modern military had ever considered. One day, he observed a training exercise led by Captain Mina. She stood before a group of soldiers in a forest clearing, her voice calm and clear. The Drac see with electromagnetic sensors. They detect heat, radiation, electrical signals. If you carry anything electronic, they will find you. If you use a powered weapon, they will know exactly where you are. She held up a bow made from carbon fiber and wood. It was a beautiful thing, simple and elegant. But this is invisible. This produces no signal. This is just a bent stick with a string. She drew an arrow from her quiver. Its tip was black glass, sharper than any metal blade. And this is just a pointed rock. But together, they can kill anything that bleeds. She turned and fired in one smooth motion. The arrow flew true and struck a target 200 meters away. Punching through armor plating that should have been impenetrable, the soldiers stared in amazement. The Drac have never fought an enemy they could not see coming, Mina continued. They have never faced an army that fights without power, without signals, without any sign of technology. We will be ghosts. We will be shadows. And we will kill them in ways they cannot understand. Kel sent this footage to the council as well. Mora laughed again. But Tehran did not respond for a long time. When he finally did, his message was short. I have studied human history. I have read about their wars, their struggles, their endless capacity for violence and survival. And I am beginning to understand something that the council does not. What is that? Kel asked. They are not regressing. They are not going mad. They are remembering. They are reaching back into their past and pulling out every trick, every tactic, every desperate strategy that kept them alive when they had nothing. They are becoming what they were before they reached the stars. Tehran paused, and what they were before was terrifying. Kel thought about this as he watched the preparations continue. Day after day, the humans worked. They did not sleep much. They did not complain. They moved with a purpose that he had never seen in any species. On the 50th day, he attended a meeting between Admiral Yuna and General Tay. They stood in a command center deep underground, surrounded by screens showing asteroid positions and troop movements. The first wave of asteroids will reach the intercept point in 40 days, Dr. Hanna reported. We have 700 rocks in the primary attack formation. 300 more in reserve? Ground forces? Tay asked. Colonel Day answered. 80% of our population has received basic combat training. 40 million soldiers are ready for direct engagement. The rest will serve as support, manufacturing weapons and supplies, and the traps. Every forest on 3 continents has been converted. Pit traps, spike fields, net snares. The Drac will not be able to move 10 meters without triggering something. Yuna nodded slowly. Good. What about civilian morale? Lieutenant Wu, a young officer who had been silent until now, spoke up. Strong, Admiral? The people are afraid, but they are also angry. They feel like the galaxy wrote them off as dead. They want to prove everyone wrong. Yuna smiled slightly. Good. Fear makes you careful. Anger makes you strong. We need both. Kel watched from the shadows, recording everything. He thought about the Council's confidence that humanity would fall. He thought about Mora's laughter and the pity in Toron's voice. And for the first time, he wondered if they had all made a terrible mistake. The humans were not preparing to die, they were preparing to win. And looking at the cold determination in Admiral Yuna's eyes, Kel realized something that chilled him to his core. The Drac had no idea what was coming. The Drac arrived on the 90th day. Exactly as predicted, they came from the darkness between stars. A swarm so vast that it blocked out entire sections of the sky. 12,000 ships, each one a living nightmare of metal and flesh. They had consumed 17 civilizations before. They had never been stopped. They had never even been slowed. The Swarm Mother watched from her command vessel as the Sol system grew larger on her sensors. She felt a flicker of something that might have been hunger. This species was young and weak. They would provide little resistance. But their planet was rich with resources. Their bodies would feed the swarm for generations. She had received reports from her scouts. The humans had refused to evacuate. They had stayed on their doomed world, apparently preparing to fight. The Swarm Mother found this amusing. Prey sometimes struggled. It never mattered. Then the first asteroid hit. It was not a large rock, maybe 50 meters across. But it had been traveling for 40 days, accelerating constantly, and by the time it reached the Drac Vanguard, it was moving at 12% of light speed. The impact was instant and absolute. 37 ships simply ceased to exist. There was no explosion, no debris field, no warning. One moment they were there, the next moment they were atoms scattered across empty space. The Swarm Mother barely had time to react before the second asteroid arrived. Then the third, then the 10th, then the 100th. The void between Jupiter and Mars became a killing field. Rocks fell like rain, each one carrying enough kinetic energy to vaporize anything it touched. The Drac formation, so perfect and orderly moments before, shattered into chaos. Ships tried to dodge, but the asteroids came from every direction. Their trajectories calculated with mathematical precision. In 2 hours, the swarm lost 3,000 vessels. The Swarm Mother screamed orders across her fleet. Spread out. Avoid the main paths. Find another route to Earth. But the humans had prepared for this too. Every approach to the inner system was covered. Secondary asteroid waves waited in reserve, ready to be launched at any ships that broke through. By the time the Drac reached Earth's orbit, only 4,000 ships remained. Less than half their original force, and they had not fired a single weapon. General Tay watched from his command bunker on Mars, a grim smile on his scarred face. First contact successful, Lieutenant Wu reported. 8,000 Drac ships destroyed. 4,000 remaining. That's still 4,000 more than we can fight in space, Tay replied. What are they doing? Splitting their forces. Looks like they're sending ground invasion. Units to Earth. They know they can't stay in orbit without getting hit by more rocks. It could let them land. We're ready. The Drac descended on Earth like a plague of locusts. Their drop pods fell through the atmosphere, burning bright trails across the sky. They expected resistance. They expected weapons, fire, missiles, energy shields. They expected to fight a war. Instead, they found forests, fields, mountains, villages that looked empty and primitive. Their sensors swept for power signatures, for technological threats, for anything that could hurt them. They found nothing. The first wave landed in the hills of Korea. 10,000 Drac warriors. Each one, a monster of chitin and muscle, poured from their pods and began advancing toward the nearest city. Their sensors showed no threats. Their commanders grew confident. This would be easy. Captain Mina watched them from a concealed position 300 meters away. She lay flat on the ground, covered in mud and leaves, invisible to any sensor ever invented. Around her, 200 soldiers waited in perfect silence. She raised her hand and made A simple gesture. The forest came alive. Arrows flew from every direction, their obsidian tips punching through the gaps in Drac armor. The aliens screamed and spun, trying to identify the threat, but there was nothing to see. No muzzle flashes, no heat signatures. Just silent death raining from the trees. Then the ground collapsed. Pit traps opened beneath Drac feet, dropping warriors onto beds of wooden spikes. Nets fell from branches, tangling flyers in carbon fiber webs that could not be cut. Soldiers rose from the earth itself, striking with ceramic blades and disappearing before the enemy could react. The Drac had fought wars for 10,000 years. They had conquered species with weapons that could crack planets, but they had never faced an enemy they could not see. They had never fought an army that attacked without power, without signals, without any warning at all. Within an hour, the first wave was destroyed. Similar scenes played out across the planet. In Europe, Drac forces walked into valleys that had been transformed into killing zones. Mountain walls launched boulders from hidden catapults. Rivers had been dammed and released on command, washing away entire columns. In South America, the jungles swallowed invaders whole. In Africa, the deserts became endless traps of sand pits and hidden spikes. The Swarm Mother watched in growing horror as her forces were annihilated. "What is happening?" she demanded. "Why can we not see them? Why can we not fight back?" Her advisors had no answers. Their technology was useless against an enemy that used no technology. Their sensors were blind to threats made of wood and stone. Their warriors, so devastating against modern armies, fell like wheat before a scythe against soldiers who fought like ancient ghosts. She made a desperate decision. She would land herself with her personal guard and take command directly. She would show these primitives what true power looked like. Her ship descended toward East Asia, where the heaviest fighting was taking place. She emerged onto a hillside, surrounded by 500 of her strongest warriors, and surveyed the battlefield. It was quiet. Too quiet. A single human walked toward her from the tree line. It was a man, old and scarred. Wearing simple clothes that carried no weapons she could see, General Tay stopped 20 meters away and looked up at the Swarm Mother. "You made a mistake," he said. His voice was calm, almost conversational. "What mistake, pray? You thought our technology made us dangerous? You thought that without ships and shields and plasma weapons, we were helpless?" He shook his head slowly. "You forgot what we were before we had those things. You forgot that we didn't evolve with technology. We evolved as hunters. As killers? We built civilizations on the bones of everything that tried to stop us." He raised his hand, and we never forgot how. The hillside exploded into violence. Soldiers rose from holes that had been dug days before, covering themselves with dirt and leaves in absolute patience. They struck with spears and axes, with bows and blades, with weapons that should have been obsolete, but worked perfectly against armor designed to stop energy beams. General Tay himself drew a simple sword, a design unchanged for 3,000 years, and walked into the battle with the calm efficiency of a man who had been waiting his whole life for this moment. The Swarm Mother fought. Her claws killed dozens of humans. Her personal guard cut down hundreds more. But for every human that fell, 10 more appeared. They were endless. They were relentless, and they would not stop. Her last sight was a young woman standing over her, arrow drawn. Face splattered with alien blood, Captain Mina released the string. "For Earth," she said softly, and then there was silence. The battle lasted 19 days. When it was over, not a single Drac remained alive in the Sol system. The few survivors who tried to flee were hunted down by asteroid strikes that followed them for millions of kilometers. Humanity had won. They had won with rocks and sticks and the memory of 10,000 years of survival, and the galaxy would never forget what they had seen. The Galaxy Council chamber had never been so quiet. 300 species filled the great hall above Velos Prime. Representatives from empires that spanned thousands of worlds, leaders of civilizations that had existed for millions of years, beings who had witnessed the rise and fall of countless cultures across the cosmos. And they were all staring at the four humans standing at the center of the room. Admiral Yuna looked exactly as she had 90 days ago. Her uniform was clean, her hair was neat, her eyes were calm. If she had spent the past 3 weeks fighting for the survival of her species, it showed no sign of it. Beside her stood General Tay, his scarred face unreadable. Captain Mina, her hands still rough from wielding weapons that belonged in museums. And Dr. Hannah, who had turned rocks into missiles with nothing but mathematics and desperation. Ambassador Toron rose slowly from his seat. His 4 eyes were fixed on Yuna with an expression that no human could read. When he spoke, his voice echoed through the silent hall. 12,000 Drak vessels entered the Sol system. None survived. The Drak swarm, which has existed for over 50,000 years and consumed 17 civilizations, has been effectively destroyed as a galactic threat. He paused. We would like to understand how this happened. Yuna stepped forward. Her voice was soft, but it carried to every corner of the chamber. You offered us evacuation. You told us to run. You said we had nothing to fight with, no weapons worth mentioning, no technology that could scratch Drak armor. She smiled slightly. You were wrong. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Delegate Mora, of the Silken Court, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. She was not laughing anymore. The Drak were powerful, Yuna continued. Their ships could withstand plasma cannons and energy beams. Their warriors could survive attacks that would kill any other species. They had conquered civilizations far more advanced than ours. She paused. But they had never faced an enemy that fought without technology. They had never encountered a species that could kill with nothing but rocks and sticks in pure determination. She gestured, and the screen behind her lit up with images. Asteroids moving through space, their engines burning bright. Soldiers rising from the earth with arrows and spears. Pit traps swallowing alien warriors. Nets falling from trees. Villages that looked empty but hid armies waiting to strike. We did not beat the Drak with superior firepower, Yuna said. We beat them by going backward. We reached into our past and pulled out every survival strategy our ancestors had ever used. We fought like the cave dwellers who killed mammoths with pointed sticks. We ambushed like the hunters who tracked prey through endless forests. We trapped like the early farmers who protected their crops from predators. General Tay stepped forward. His voice was deep and rough, but there was no anger in it. Only a quiet pride. The galaxy thinks of technology as strength. The more advanced your weapons, the more powerful you are. But technology is just a tool. It can be lost. It can be taken away. It can fail at the worst possible moment. He shook his head. What cannot be taken is knowledge, experience, the memory of how to survive when survival seems impossible. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of species who had looked down on humanity for centuries. Our ancestors survived ice ages with nothing but fire and animal skins. They crossed oceans on boats made from wood and rope. They built pyramids and temples and cities with their bare hands. They domesticated wolves and turned them into loyal companions. They learned to grow food from the earth and medicine from plants. His voice hardened slightly. They did all of this before they invented electricity. Before they discovered atoms. Before they ever dreamed of reaching the stars. Captain Mina spoke next. Her voice was young but steady. The Drak used electromagnetic sensors. They could see any powered weapon from kilometers away. So we used weapons that produced no signal. Wood and stone and glass. Materials that have been killing things for 10,000 years. She held up an obsidian arrowhead, its edges gleaming in the light. This is volcanic glass. It is sharper than any metal blade ever made. Our ancestors used it to hunt and fight and survive. We simply remembered how. Dr. Hannah stepped forward last. The asteroids were the same principle. The Drak ships were designed to absorb energy weapons. Plasma spreads across their hulls. Lasers dissipate. But kinetic impact? Mass times velocity? That is physics that no armor can resist. She smiled slightly. We did not invent anything new. We simply applied principles that have existed since the beginning of the universe. We threw rocks. Very fast rocks, but still just rocks. Admiral Yuna reclaimed the center of the floor. You asked how we did it? The answer is simple. We remembered who we were. Not a young species playing with borrowed technology. Not a weak civilization surviving on the mercy of others. We are the descendants of survivors. Every human alive today carries the genes of ancestors who faced extinction and refused to die. She looked directly at Delegate Mora. You said we had no great works, no ancient wisdom, nothing worth saving. Her voice was quiet but carried an edge of steel. You were wrong. Our greatest work is our survival. Our ancient wisdom is written in our bones, in our instincts, in the way we think and fight and refuse to give up. We have been building ourselves from nothing since before your species existed, and we will continue building ourselves from nothing for as long as the universe allows. The chamber was absolutely silent. Ambassador Tehran stood and performed a gesture that Kel had never seen before. It was the helix sign of profound respect, reserved only for equals or superiors. It had not been offered to a younger species in over 10,000 years. The Galaxy Council formally recognizes humanity, Tehran said, his voice thick with emotion. Not as a protected member, not as a developing civilization, but as a full sovereign power with all rights and responsibilities that entails. Yuna nodded once. We accept. We offer our assistance in rebuilding your world. Whatever resources you need, whatever help we can provide. Yuna smiled slightly. Thank you, Ambassador, but we prefer to rebuild ourselves. The old-fashioned way, a murmur went through the crowd. Some species looked confused. Others looked impressed. A few looked afraid. Tehran tilted his head. You do not want our help? We want your friendship, Yuna replied. We want your respect. We want to be treated as equals, not as children who need protection. But we do not need your technology or your resources. We built ourselves from caves to stars once. We can do it again if necessary. She gathered her delegation with a glance. The Drak are gone. But other threats exist in this galaxy. Other species who might look at humanity and see weakness because we are young, because we lack your ancient ships and weapons and history. She paused at the door and looked back. If any of them are listening, I have one message. The chamber waited. Remember what you saw today? Remember that we beat the most feared enemy in the galaxy with rocks and sticks. Remember that we never stopped being the survivors, who crawled out of caves and conquered our world with nothing but determination and clever hands. Her eyes were cold and calm. And remember that we are just getting started. The human delegation left the chamber. Ambassador Tehran remained standing for a long moment after they were gone. Around him, the Galaxy Council erupted into discussion. Some were excited. Some were worried. Some were already calculating how to strengthen their relationships with this strange, terrifying species. But Tehran was silent. He had lived for 800 years. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had watched species evolve and die and scatter across the stars. And in all that time, he had never felt what he felt now. He felt hope, because humanity had shown the galaxy something important today. Something that had been forgotten in the endless pursuit of more advanced technology, more powerful weapons. More sophisticated defenses. They had shown that survival was not about what you had. It was about what you were willing to become in humanity, Tehran realized. Was willing to become anything necessary to survive. That made them the most dangerous species in the galaxy, and perhaps the most valuable allies anyone could ask for. The chamber slowly emptied, but the memory of what happened there would echo through the cosmos for generations to come. The day humanity reminded the galaxy what it meant to truly fight for. Survival with nothing but rocks and sticks and an absolutely unbreakable will to live.